Hey everyone, back to another video. I'm Aman, a startup founder based in Tokyo, and today I want to talk about. So the concept is, the problem is a lot of people, when you're an entrepreneur or even in general, like a lot of people are like talk about qualification, like how are you qualified to do whatever you want to do. Like, oh, you're not qualified to do this, you don't have any experience doing this or that. And for a lot of people, this also is not just an external voice but also an internal voice, like, oh, who am I to do this or that or whatever, right? Now this is not going to be a motivational talk, like this is not a motivational speech that I'm going to give you now, right? I'm going to talk about certain facts that you might want to consider if that voice appears in somewhere, like outside or inside your head, right? So the first thing I would say is, I'll start with an example. Okay, I'll start with an example. So the word espresso and latte, and cappuccino, right? These words for coffee, different kinds of coffee, are Italian, correct? Italian words, espresso, cappuccino, whatever, right? Does coffee grow in Italy? I don't think so. I mean, I know for a fact that coffee doesn't grow in Italy. Coffee is not an Italian product at all, but for the most part. But all over the world, from here in Japan to Korea to America to China to India, espresso is espresso, right? Cappuccino is cappuccino, and it's Italian. Why is that? How did the Italians, how did these things come to have an Italian word instead of an African word? The Africans should have invented, I mean, maybe they did, but let's just say the Africans should have been the most qualified to give it an African name and come up with a drink for cappuccino and espresso and all these stuff, right? Latte. Well, the Italians were not qualified, for the most part, by that logic, to create an espresso or a cappuccino. So I think you get my point, right? Chocolate doesn't grow in Belgium, but Belgian chocolate is a pretty popular flavor, right? It's renowned around the world. Swiss chocolate, Belgian chocolate, known all over the world. Even in Japan you can buy Swiss chocolate and Belgian chocolate. The Belgians should have been the least qualified. It's a small landlocked country, that is kind of really small and non-influential for the most part, for the purpose of our argument, right? And they should be the last country qualified, so to speak, to create such a global brand in chocolate, right? And so here's the thing. There's no such thing as qualification, right? Qualification is in ability and creating something that the market will accept. If you can create something that the market can say, oh, that's good, I like it, then you are qualified because you did the thing, right? Who's qualified to who was qualified to build Microsoft, right? A Harvard dropout or some computer scientist who was born in the 40s or something, right? Who should have been more qualified to do that? Well, it turns out a Harvard dropout built Microsoft because no company like Microsoft had ever been built before, right? So by default, anything worth doing, nobody's qualified to do, right? Who was Roger Bannister, the guy who broke the 4-minute mile? What qualified him to do that, right? Well, he wasn't any specially gifted athlete known around the world, he's the number one runner in the world, the number one sprinter in the world, and he is capable of breaking the 4-minute mile. No, that did not happen that way, right? The guy who broke the 4-minute mile was the guy who was qualified to do it. Simple as that. Qualification comes after you do it, not before. Okay? If there's anything you take away from this video, qualification comes after you do the thing, not before. So, yeah, you are qualified to win an Olympic medal after you win it. You are qualified to build the business or whatever that you want to build after you've built it, right? You should never say to yourself, like, oh, you're not qualified to do that. I'm not qualified for this. I'm not qualified for that, right? I mean, let's talk about, I'll take a controversial example. The medical profession, right? Like, yeah, you have to be qualified to cut up a patient and operate on them, right? You have licenses and stuff. I would go so far to say you don't have to be qualified, you have to be licensed. And that is a fact, right? They don't care where you studied medical science. They just care if you pass the bar exam, correct? So certain places you have to be licensed, and that's fair, you know. But why do they call it a medical practice, right? Why are doctors practicing on patients? Is that a foreign concept? No. Everywhere in the world, it's like, yeah, it's a medical practice, a clinical practice, right? Even the world's biggest doctor, the biggest neurosurgeon, is not qualified to operate on the next patient, on the first patient, right? Fuck. Well, that's the video.